Well, good evening, everyone. Can I just check, first of all, before we start, is there anyone here from one of the big 6 energy companies, apart from Carsten? No, good. Okay. Let me get stuck in that case. I happen to know there's one other person here with that. This presentation is going to be in 2 parts. So firstly, I'd like to start by explaining the underlying rationale for building the platform and the way we've done it. And perhaps generalize those observations to talk a little bit more about what I think are things which are potentially more generally applicable outside of the energy space. And then Electron is quite an ambitious project, so I don't want to try and cover everything that we're doing within it, but what I'd like to do is focus in on one part of that. And I've got a couple of colleagues here who'll talk about some of their work within Electron. So, just a thought. This kind of news coverage is in the press pretty much every week and every weekend. This one actually is quite amusing, the one at the back, because it's actually the Energy Ombudsman whose bill was wrong and who failed to get satisfaction and was in the rather unfortunate position of having to complain to himself. Fortunately, he had the chairman's telephone number, so he got that one sorted out. But for most of the rest of us, that's a problem that we can't solve that way. So, first question, why is your generation of an invoice any better than my generation of an invoice? If I've got the contract, I know how much electricity or gas I've used, why can you calculate it better than I can? And the answer is there's no reason why that's the case. Of course, if I've got the tariff and the details, I can do that. And secondly, if it's wrong, I don't want to be reported to some credit agency because you've got that wrong, and then it becomes my problem to sort that out, and I incur the costs. So, with that in mind, what we're trying to do is create a level playing field for everyone, where the smallest consumer, right up to the biggest supplier, is all playing on the same turf. Okay, so why did we choose energy? First of all, it's not banking. And the reason for that is, as I'm sure you've noticed, bankers have very deep pockets. They've cottoned on to the fact that blockchains are going to be impacting their business quite substantially, and they clearly are not going to be standing still and letting that happen. So there's an awful lot of people in that space anyway, and I don't want to be crowding out in that particular area. Plus, I happen to know a little bit about the energy sector. So what is it that we want to look out for, then, in that case, in the energy space? What might be relevant here? First thing is somebody generating a service that is going to continue for a period of time? Secondly, is there an element or lack of any trust between the various different parties? And I'd like to argue that that is the case, and the next slide will demonstrate that a little bit more. So you've got a situation in which you've got an ongoing product being sold, you've got a lack of trust potentially between the various different parties. The product itself is relatively commoditized, so you can measure it relatively easily, and potentially can be switched. There's a power imbalance between the supplier and the consumer in some cases, and secondly, there's a recognition that there's a problem here. So I think all of those apply to the retail energy space, certainly in the UK and probably a number of other markets. So I just comment that there's probably a number of other markets in which that applies, and highlight broadband, potentially mobile phones. I don't know if I'm on the best tariff or not. I'm sure most people here don't either. And there's a variety of other areas that you can see where potentially these same driving forces are going to come into play. So I have a theme here, which is that energy suppliers can't be trusted. And here's an example of why not. So it's not just the fact that the billing is frequently wrong. Switching is prevented in many cases when it's rightfully should be going through. Virtually every week or two, there's some other update on the Ofgem website where you'll see another energy supplier has been fined for whatever it is that they failed to do to stick to their licenses. TalkTalk I've thrown in there. They're not energy, obviously, but I'm sure you're all familiar with the problems in that particular space. So with this kind of a background, we wanted to create a vision for what we wanted to do with Electron. So the first thing is we want something that was acting in the customer's interests, an open platform. What we're doing is between the meter and the supplier. So we're focusing on building a platform. We're not focusing on building a lot of services on that. And as I'll explain a little bit later, we're looking to create a platform that other people can come on and deliver services and be paid for delivering those services. We want something that's going to drive competition, price competition, going to drive competition in transparency and lower fees generally across the board, and improve customer service. We want it to form a catalyst for innovation. So open the platform up and let other parties come along and participate and offer additional services on the platform. The ambition is to create a ledger of record for energy use, for billing, for the switching of services. All of that we'd like to see embedded in this platform and being the record of that. And finally, of course, providing transparency in this marketplace. So what sort of problems do we think that this solves? First of all, oversight, because there is transparency in relatively real time, and hopefully I'll show some of that, demonstrate some of that coming up, that you can see that as a regulator you have the opportunity to see what's going on in this marketplace and to see what's happening. The costs will be less because you don't have monopoly suppliers of centralized services. There's competition to provide the services. If an energy supplier goes bankrupt right now, that's a big problem. First of all, because they've got all the records of all the customers sitting inside their four walls. And secondly, because the regulators are then scrambling around trying to replace, for all those suppliers, for all those customers to a new supplier. So in the case of a blockchain implementation, that becomes the supplier's problem, not the customers and Ofgem's problem. It breaks down barriers to entry. Right now, if you wanted to set up a switching service, for example, and have any reasonable level of success, you'd need millions of pounds to advertise. It's all driven by marketing. So there'll be less of an emphasis on that. So breaking down those barriers to entry. Rogues would be easily spotted and highlighted. You wouldn't get the situation in which vulnerable customers are moved from one energy supplier to another, and that would be completely transparent on the platform where you can see what the switching taking place, and you'd be able to see effectively what the benefits or costs of that switching were going to be. Complaints. Most of the complaints in this business center around billing. If you make the billing part of the service and open that up so there are two parties to a billing calculation, then you remove a large amount of the problem there. And finally, on the inclusion front, just one observation on that. If you have a platform like this that opens up this whole space, this whole market, you are able to start doing things like divorcing the extension of credit from the supply of the energy itself. And that makes things a lot easier in terms of tariffs for prepayment meters and so forth. I mentioned briefly the innovation aspect of this. The point here is that anyone can introduce a new service on a platform. So some thoughts that we had around that, and we played around with a couple of these, providing billing integration services. Right now, if you get your energy supplied, it comes from a number of different suppliers if you're switching, and it's all going to be a different bill every time, and there's no consistency between those. So providing some integration on that. Forecasting. Moving house. Right now, an estate agent sits along, takes down the details, passes it on to the solicitor, escrows the amount and so forth. All of that could be automated and taken care of. If you're a short-term landlord and you have people moving in and out, right now, basically, you cover the cost as part of the rent. Well, you have the opportunity to effectively do that even on a short-term basis and to be able to bill for that and see what that is accurately and separately. So how are we going to do this? First part of the problem is getting data in. Now, there's no big magic secret to this. There's a big initiative going on at the moment, as I'm sure everyone's aware, and has been going on for a long time, on smart meters, which are going to be rolled out over the next few years. And that is one mechanism, and we're agnostic as to which way this information gets in, but certainly smart meters is one of them. But also we can capture the data in other ways. There are little devices that you can attach to your meter right now, which will just talk to a storage device, and they cost around about 30 or 40 pounds, and that would just happen automatically every 15 minutes and does exactly the same thing, at least from the customer's perspective. We're also developing a mobile application which has an optical character recognition element to it. And actually, at the end of this, I'll ask if anyone gets a chance and doesn't mind, we'd love to get some photographs of your meters at home, because we're trying to train up our machine learning algorithm. We need an awful lot of photographs of meters. So that's on our website, and there's a Raspberry Pi 3, one of the latest ones, on offer, randomly picked for anyone who helps us on that. So that's getting the data in. We're currently using IPFS, which works very nicely for us. We're also exploring Big Chain DB, if people are familiar with that, and certainly be interested in talking to anyone afterwards who's had some experience of using that. So that's getting the data in, and the idea is it gets into the platform, or gets available to the platform in some way. And this is our concept of the meter on the left-hand side and then the suppliers on the right-hand side. But the main attraction to us is being able to create a platform on which these additional services can be built. And that's where we see all the value added and all the innovation that's going to start taking place around in this space. So the supply contracts are the key things that are the element of this, and in a moment I'll give you an example of how that works, and we'll see some of the stuff that we've been able to do on that. So let's talk briefly about what we've been up to. We have really four main work segments: the data capture and storage, which I briefly talked about, and the mobile devices and so forth that we're building. The invoicing services, which I won't go through, which is relatively boring but essential for this, which allows us to calculate and to go from meter readings through to energy usage and all the way through based on tariffs to the calculations. And then the smart contracts and the platform itself. And then the fourth part has been some work on visualization, which we have been doing recently. So I'd like to, actually no, I'm sorry, we're going to go to the first part. Hopefully we can get this to work. I think that's running. This is a visualization. It's written in Visualisation. Ofgem is the central party which authorizes these suppliers. So the suppliers here are in this sort of orangey color, and the blue are the meters. This is running, or has been running on the testnet, and what we've done here, we could actually set it up, but we didn't want to take a risk depending on the internet connection here. But essentially what it's doing is it's running through, in relatively quick time, through a bunch of simulations that we put through on the testnet. And what's happening here are these meters are entering into contracts with suppliers, and these green items here are these contracts being created. And I think one of these you'll see, so this meter here, is that the right one? You'll see is switching between different suppliers. So that is one of the visualizations we do. Obviously, that's great if you want to zoom in and see what's going on and be able to see part of that. But in practice, we're looking at a much bigger scale than this. So we've cut down and filtered out the number of meters that we're looking at in there. So I think what I'd like to do now is talk about, or move on to talk about the other side of the visualization work that we've been doing, which involves R, and let me see, have we got Ben and Kate here? You want to come and do your bit? There you go.
Thank you. So what we've been doing is actually creating the first publicly available R package in order to access the blockchain, in Ethereum blockchain. This basically allows you to take all of the information that is in the blockchain, in the Ethereum blockchain, and put it into R and use R's statistical properties, its machine learning properties, to access and parse the data. It queries the blockchain using the JSON remote procedure call. The only disadvantage is you do need to have a full Ethereum node in order to do this. But once you've got it in there, we have a bunch of programs that will allow you to access. You can access the block data itself. You can download the transactions and parse the transactions. You can also look at the transaction receipts. We have a bulk download manager, so you can download all this information a lot quicker and easier. And at the moment, we do have a hexadecimal conversion, although if you do download this, and the link will be later, and you can break it, please let us know. We'd love to know any problems you find with this. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that is on the R program package at the moment is for looking at the transactions, downloading them, and putting them into a format that R can really read. But one thing we have done is created an initial visualization. So this plot that you can see is from 5 minutes worth of data. So this is just simply 5 minutes at 7 a.m. On the last day of March, looking at the nodes and the transactions between different accounts. So each point, each dot is an account on the Ethereum blockchain. The arrows, which don't show up particularly well, but they're the transactions, pointing in the direction of which Ether is flowing. We've only looked at those in which Ether has been transferred, not data. But one thing we wanted to do is, we don't necessarily know what you guys want to look at on the blockchain. So we've tried to make these as open as possible. In this case, you can set the number of payments received. You can set a threshold and find the point with a high degree, so a high number of payments received. So if you only want to find nodes that have 200 payments, you can do that. You can also do the same with the number of out degrees, so the payments sent. And also, if you wanted to find simply transactions that transact a high amount of Ether, you can set that value as well. And in the case of the visualization, they turn up as black arrows. So this is one of the programs we have available. We've been using these programs to look at the Ethereum over time. This is one of the plots that we have. So this is the average number of transactions per account on the network from middle of August up to the beginning of March. The black points are for transactions sent, so this will be the total number of transactions sent divided by the number of people sending them. The higher the number simply means fewer people are sending more transactions. We believe that some of this structure is due to, for example, mining activity. We can also see the two dark lines over the 4-day period when there was the Ethereum DevCon 1, I believe, conference. So you can actually see where the effect that this is having. One thing we haven't done is gone past the release of Homestead, which would be quite interesting to look at to see how the release of Homestead has reached that, but we haven't quite got to that level yet. So we've been using the R package, which is publicly available, the link will be at the end, to look at the graphing, what's happening on the blockchain.
I haven't said anything yet. Cool. So I've been working with Kate, developing some of the functions within the R package. Just wanted to really quickly run through a couple of examples of the sort of things we've been playing with whilst developing them. So this is taking a look at some 3.2 million transactions that we've taken off the blockchain since the public net went live last year in August. On the left, you can just see it's a cumulative view of the total number of unique addresses on the dotted line at the bottom, and the transactions between them, which is the sort of solid line. This obviously is quite easy to do in a software package like R, so just the ability to kind of pull these transactions in and do some analysis is quite useful. It's largely tracking the same, so the graph on the right is actually the ratio between the two, so you can see that pretty much it's staying flat throughout. For every connection there's a node, basically. For every address there is a connection as well. Kind of suggesting at the moment, most of the addresses coming into the network are actually kind of establishing one unique connection, and are either sort of throwaway addresses being used once, or are being used for one purpose and only interacting with one other address. Something else we've been doing is using a piece of software called Gephi. Gephi is a really good open source network visualization package. So we've been using R to kind of aggregate the data to go from the sort of 3.2 million transactions down to something a bit more plottable. The plot on the right, if you can call it a plot, is 200,000 transactions that we've kind of pulled in. As you can kind of see, there isn't much in the way of structure there. You can see sort of a couple of dense areas where the nodes are a bit sort of darker coloured. But we can sort of go back to R and start using some of the functions available in there to be a bit more interesting. One of the things we're doing is looking at community detection within the network. So we do this using a random walk algorithm. There are several implementations of that available within R and are quite straightforward to use once you've got your data in there. Basically, you perform a lot of repeated random walks of a fixed length from any given node. So you start somewhere and walk sort of 4 steps in any direction. With the kind of theory being that at any given time, you're much more likely to randomly stay within your community than to exit into another community. So if you keep repeating this over and over again, you kind of build up a statistical pattern of where you think the communities in the structure are. And finally, we can also add some kind of more visual structure that sort of people can recognize just by taking the kind of densely clustered areas and making them repel each other. So kind of we add a few of these bits in, and we end up with a plot that looks a bit more like this, which is a lot more pleasant than the last one. So you can kind of see around the edge the sort of really dense areas that we could see before in the grey. They're probably some entities that you'd expect to see out there, where you're seeing a high number of transactions going out. You've also got the kind of big white cloud in the middle, which is essentially all of the addresses that are kind of just those single-use, unique connections that we were talking about. And also you can see the community detection has provided the colours here, so it's actually done quite a good job at distinguishing the different kind of areas of transaction, apart from the one here that's got 2 colours in green. So we need to sort of go back and either find a different implementation of these random walk algorithms or just sort of tweak it basically to try and get that community detection a little bit better. And this is kind of really useful in terms of looking at that macro scale. So we can feed in hundreds of thousands of lines of data into this and start looking at the structure. So once we've got some contracts and stuff on there, we can start pointing it at our own kind of live environments and stuff and sort of getting some analysis out of it like that. That's everything I've been working on. I'm going to hand back to Paul to summarise, I think.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you. So just to let you know, we're going to open source that. So if any of you are aficionados, that will be available, I think, later on today or tomorrow. We have another couple of other bits and pieces that we're out on GitHub. One is a IPFS .NET client and another for Ethereum with a portable class library API client. So that's it. We're hiring. So if anyone wants to come and help us create a level playing field, please come and have a chat with me later. The website has a number of these links as well and resources, so you don't need to panic about copying it all down now. One thing I would like to say is that this ability for us to get going so quickly and to do all of this and get moving is in many ways down to Innovate UK. We were very fortunate in being awarded a fairly sizable grant from Innovate UK in the last few weeks, in the last round. So that's what's supporting it, and I think
I'm the Toby Proctor that Paul mentioned earlier, and I work for Innovate UK. Who has heard of Innovate UK? Who knows who we are? Oh, that's not bad. Who's heard of the Technology Strategy Board, which is who we were? Oh, good. That's more know than you know, which is a great thing. So I'm not going to talk. Excuse me. I'm not going to talk about blockchain. I'm not going to talk about proof of stake, proof of work. I'm going to talk about where I work. I'm going to talk about what we do, and fundamentally, I'm going to talk about money and how you, if you're working in this technology area, can go about getting some of it to help your project, like Paul has. Wrong button. There you go. So, Innovate UK Technology Strategy Board. We're a part of the Department of Business Innovation and Skills. So we are not quite civil servants, but we work for government. We've been in place for 9 years now, so since July 2007, and we have helped 7,500 companies with grants to help them do technology development and take technology risks that will allow them to launch new products, new processes, new services more quickly. Why do we do that? We do that because we want them to be successful, we want them to employ more people, we want them to essentially earn more money and pay more taxes, so the UK economy grows and becomes a stronger economy. In those 9 years, we've given out nearly £2 billion. You know, that's a pretty significant amount of money. But that money has kind of returned to the economy a much greater amount, between 11.5 and 13. We don't know exactly. It's very hard to measure these kind of things because, you know, it's all tied up in jobs and profits that you can't quite determine exactly how much of it is what you've done. But, you know, significant leverage on the money we've got. And we've helped to create 55,000 jobs. You know, it's the companies that do the work here. It's not us, but it's, you know, we help them to do their job. And we work across the industrial sector. So we work with small companies and large companies. We work with academics, and a lot of the work we do is around helping academics work with companies and turn their research and their ideas into new products and services. We work across the kind of industrial sectors, from kind of healthcare to space, from agriculture through to quantum technologies, which is kind of one of our more interesting areas at the minute. And we're also starting to fund some work in blockchain. So I've been working kind of for the last six, 7 months, really trying to understand what we should be doing in this space. Is there a role for us to help fund some of these projects, or is it really about helping the companies who are developing the tools and the technologies to speak to the companies in the industrial sectors who will make use of this and who will kind of turn that into new processes and to drive the growth of those industries? But we have funded a small number of projects. The first one you may or may not be aware of is Provenance. So we've actually helped them out a couple of times now. They've had £330,000-ish from us. This is all a matter of public record. It's all on the website. And if you don't know Provenance, then their job is to, or the work they're doing is to really bring transparency to supply chains. You know, they're focusing very much on the high-end artisan goods, but the platform they're building is much more broad than that. Another company we've helped out is a company called Tremonex. Tremonex are an FCA-regulated Forex company. They operate in 45 different currencies, I think, if I'm right. And the work we're doing with them, or the work we're funding with them, is to help them explore how blockchain can help with Forex trading and Forex settlement, and also to drive the maturity so that they've got something they can take to the regulator to show that this is working and how it works and what it can do, and so they get the regulator on board. More recently, so this is in January this year, we committed to another 3 projects to, again, a total of about £250,000. That is not quite public information yet, but, you know, the fact we're doing it is there. And so the total in the last 6 months is we've invested £750,000 in blockchain-based projects and companies, and that's really just the start. So that's kind of a little bit of the history, but actually, you know, how do you get to us? How do you find the money? How do you get anything out? How do you access the money? So we run a competitive scheme. So we issue calls for kind of business plans and grant requests, and we expect kind of companies to put together a proposal that essentially describes what's the opportunity, what are you trying to do, what's the technology you're going to use and how are you going to do it, and what's the value that you're going to create in the company. And if you can answer those 3 questions, and you can make a compelling case, and you've got a decent project plan, so you can articulate what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and it all stands up and it's robust, you stand a chance of winning the money out of us. We take no equity. This is one of the things about it. These are grants. You know, if you're successful in a competition, you get given the money. We need you to tell us what you're doing and that you're actually progressing, but we don't take any equity. We have no interest in your IP. This is really about getting the companies off the ground and helping companies to take technology risks. We don't give you all the money for a project. You know, you need to have some skin in the game as a company, and but for small companies we'll fund kind of up to 70%. Large companies will kind of fund about 40 or 50%, depending on the details of the competition and the price and the size of the company. And crucially, our next competition that is probably the earliest opportunity for people thinking about blockchain solutions is in June. So it opens in June. £14 million total on the table. It's not just for blockchain. I might need to make this quite clear. This is a completely open scope. So anybody who bids into that will be up against all kinds of other projects, and it is highly competitive. If you're putting together your business plan on the back of a fag packet and thinking you're going to stand a chance, you need to think again. You know, you get a kind of 5 or 10% success rate in some of these competitions. So there is a lot of work, but there is a lot of money on the table. If you've got a particular sector in mind, you can look at our sector-focused competitions. Those are kind of materials and manufacturing. There's an infrastructure side which includes energy, so Paul could bid back into that for the next stage. The emerging and enabling technology, which is kind of our longer-term, higher-risk projects that are looking at new opportunities, including things like space and some of our digital sectors, and our health and life sciences. So if you're focused on one of those sectors, look out for our sector-focused competitions. All the details are on our website, along with our new delivery plan, which came out today. I'm here until 9 o'clock, so if you have any questions, you want to ask me about what happens and how it might work, come and talk to me. I don't have any money on me that you can take away, so please don't think I've got it. And also, I don't make the decisions. You know, we run the competitions, we set the scope of what's going on. We then get independent assessors to look at these, judge the quality of the proposals, and to kind of recommend us to which ones need to be taken forward. And then we look at how much money we've got and fund the ones we can. That's it. Thank you very much.